Okay, so this would be my revisited, but also kinda already a long-term review of the Xiaomi Mi 6 after a little bit over 3 weeks. And thanks to CCT Shop for letting me keep it that long, because that just allows me to share some extra opinion review after this kind of extended review period. But I will do this in kind of the same way as I did the last time. So I will go through my old pros and cons of the review, see if something has changed there, and then I have some extra notes that I just wrote down in this longer time that I used it. And I would say let's get into the first thing here, which would be durability. Because I am a little bit disappointed about the back, because I'm not quite so sure how well the camera picks it up, but because I have actually quite a lot very thin hairline scratches, and they are still quite hard to see and not something that really bothers me, but I'm not quite sure where they came from, because yes, I have to admit I dropped the device once from about 40 centimeters, it fell on exactly this point, and there is a minimal but definitely not on the camera visible dent. But all these scratches can't be just from this drop, because otherwise they wouldn't go in all kind of different directions. I get one, I guess this one is from the drop, which is the most notable one, but I guess the other ones just happened on laying it down on the table and maybe moving it along, which is something that I actually try to avoid as much as possible. But as you can see, after 3 weeks it already has a few, so maybe I should have actually used this included case that it came with, and I definitely wanted to, but I just didn't have it on hand because I had new pants with very slippery pockets, and I knew I will drop it, and it did happen. But otherwise, I have to say, in terms of durability, it was absolutely fine because nothing major has happened. And if I go through my old pros and cons, I wrote down gorgeous design, which I still think it is, because it still feels amazing in the hand. The build quality on this unit is actually better than on my first review period, because there I complained that the SIM card tray would stick out, which it doesn't really any much. So here, as you can see, this is now flat, maybe minimal. The buttons also feel still nice, and everything else is absolutely great, absolutely no problem. And if it comes to the display, I won't say anything else, but it is a flagship level display. The only thing that I have on this version is a little bit of a yellow tint at the bottom, which is definitely harder to see on. As you can see, there is a little bit of a tint, definitely not noticeable on the camera, but it is something that actually bothers me just a little bit. My first review unit didn't have that and was super satisfying. The speakers are still very good, absolutely, because they are very loud and the quality is really good, so I'm still super happy with those. Same as for the headphone jack, nothing has changed here. The performance, I wrote it down, top of the line performance at the moment, and yes, it still absolutely is, because it's still absolutely smooth, absolutely buttery smooth, fast, responsive, everything. I'm still super happy with that. The next thing that I wrote down, it starts charging very quick and it has great battery life, and that is actually something that I wanted to address, because in my review period I still used it with the Chinese ROM. And a few people then were concerned because I already mentioned that there is a German shop ROM that I got from CCT Shop, which already had all things working like sync and so on. And someone said maybe my old battery stats aren't actually valid. But I used it again for 1 week and nothing has changed pretty much, because I don't see any real difference. I still get 6.5 hours on mobile data over the course of a longer day, maybe like 7 on mixed use. But the thing is just something that I have to point out. I'm not quite sure if it's because of the shop ROM, which is kind of something that I doubt, but just maybe a new good thing. But the standby drain is a little bit disappointing, but I will get to that a little bit later. Otherwise, very powerful software still. With the shop ROM, I had no issues. Everything worked just fine. So that's why I didn't switch to a global ROM or the one that is available on Xiaomi EU yet. But if this would be my daily driver, I would definitely do this at some point, because the shop ROM won't get updated. The next thing that I said, just to really quickly cover that, really good front-facing cam. Yes, it still is. Quite a good low-light cam. Almost great main cam. Very good video cam. Absolutely. And the value. Now, I know a few reviewers actually said that it's actually priced a little bit high for what it is, but because it's a imported phone, which makes no sense for me, because you have to see this phone as it is, and it is an absolute flagship level device. And I don't really mind that it's just a 1080p display, and for a reviewer therefore giving it a lower score just for the display because of that is, in my opinion, not okay, because this display is gorgeous. Maybe mine not so much because of the yellow tint, but the first one that I had was absolutely superb. Now let's get to the back things. Tiny build imperfections, actually not a thing, and maybe something I wouldn't have even mentioned in my first review, because this review unit is flat, everything is perfect, everything is fine on this one, and this would have definitely easily gotten a great build quality without the tiny imperfections, because this unit just doesn't have it. But this seems that maybe shows that first badges just aren't that great in terms of quality control. Otherwise, I did say not quite flagship worthy IPS glow. That's true, but it never really bothered me in normal use, not at all. Speakers tends to slightly distort at maximum volume, actually something that didn't bother me at all as well. No headphone jack, I know this is something that annoys a lot of people, but I also have to say the included headphone jack adapter is great. And I'm okay with that because I would just leave that on my headphones plugged in, and with that adapter you just get a way better sound than you do on anything, on any other device, and this is just something we have to still in some way appreciate. Then issues with Google services for now. Like I said, not an issue anymore. I think the Xiaomi EU ROM fixed it, and on my shop ROM it was fixed already from the start. So nothing to bother here about anymore. Then no band 20, but I guess for all the international people, it maybe doesn't support all the bands for LTE for you. In my use, where I am, even without LTE band 20, I didn't really notice anything. Reception was strong, all was fine, so I didn't actually notice any difference. And if I wouldn't have known, I wouldn't have even noticed that it doesn't have band 20. The last thing, usually it has to be imported, that's still a thing. But now let's get to my notes that I have a few weeks later on. Contrast boost in sun. So this is something that happens if you are in brighter sun outside. The display doesn't get really any brighter anymore because it doesn't have to, but what it does is it boosts the contrast to make things easier to read, but therefore it also gets some kind of glowing around text and so on, and you get something like double contrast, which is something I personally don't like at all. Not an issue for me, mostly because I usually don't use devices in bright sunlight all the time. But if I would, that could have actually been something that would bother me, but it doesn't. Then battery with sync is just as good. I've mentioned that already because I did not notice any differences. I still get like 6.5 hours on my normal use. But one thing that I wanted to mention is the standby drain is disappointing, because the longer the day is, the battery life, the weaker the battery life gets, and actually the more you use this device, so it doesn't even get a chance to kind of drain much on standby, the better the battery life is. So this is disappointing. I still think this is a general Nougat thing, but I hope they will may be able to fix that, because it's not bad enough, because the overall battery life of this phone is still, after all, very great, and it can kind of make a sacrifice in terms for battery life, in terms of standby drain. That's not a huge issue, but it is something that I still would like to see fixed. Then it slips around all the time. I said this already. On my bed, on my couch, wherever I have it, where it's not completely flat or something that gives it grip, it will slip off. Of course, there is a solution, the included case, which is actually not bad, because it's, as you can see, very subtle. It's almost not noticeable if you have it somewhere laying on the desk. I didn't even notice that there is one, and it's quite grippy. It's quite fine. So actually I should have used it, definitely. Then it only gets warm after a longer period of using with data use, which is something very nice, because like for example the S8 got so warm already, kind of like all the time. This one not. I really have to use it at least like half an hour on mobile data, quite hard to notice any temperatures, because otherwise it feels absolutely moderate with these already very high temperatures as they are here in my studio. And like I already said, the back scratch is quite easy. It's not an issue yet, and I just don't think it happened all due to one drop, because otherwise all the scratches would go in one direction, and I did lift it up very easily. But this was my impression. So just as a final conclusion, after about 8 minutes, I still absolutely love this device. I can still absolutely recommend, and it still is my favorite phone, and I think kind of already the most underestimated flagship of 2017. This will definitely become my daily driver once I need a new daily driver, because I just don't see anything upcoming in the near future. Especially not for this price with these exact, for me, matching qualities. Of course, you have to decide that on your own, because for someone who takes more approach on a camera level, who just needs a better camera, maybe the best one, it's not quite there yet. It's totally fine for me, because like I said, it's still an almost great cam with overall good qualities in that regard. But that's maybe something where it falls short. Of course, not everyone wants to import. The bands could be an issue, and the software, because like I said, I'm running the shop ROM, but once I would use it as my own driver, I would definitely switch to a global ROM or an EU ROM or anything like that to get newer updates, and then I don't see the issue. Of course, not everyone wants to do it. This is a legit issue, something that I need to point out. But otherwise, I have to say, I'm still super impressed, super happy with this phone, and thanks to CCT for the longer period of time. And since I will maybe keep it a little bit longer, I will also compare with the HTC U11, if it actually comes when it should, which would be kind of in 2 days, which I highly doubt. But this would have been it. If you liked it, thumbs up, maybe a subscription. Don't forget that one, that would be very helpful. And maybe comments down there below what you think, if you've maybe already used it. That would have been it. Bye.